Eleanor Grace Hartwell slammed both palms on the defendant's table so hard, the water glass shattered. "Say it again," she whispered, her voice cutting through the stunned courtroom. "Look me in the eyes, and say it again." Preston Whitmore III stepped back, his $1,000 loafers squeaking against the marble floor. For the first time in his life, the man who had called her white trash 5 seconds ago saw something in this waitress's eyes that money couldn't buy. Rage. Pure, controlled, devastating rage. He didn't know it yet, but he had just triggered the one clause that would destroy everything he owned. If you want to see what happens when the powerful fall to their knees, subscribe now and stay until the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The Cook County Courthouse in Chicago had seen its share of drama. Divorce cases where millionaires cried. Murder trials where killers smiled. But nobody in courtroom 7B had ever witnessed anything like what was about to happen on this Tuesday morning. Eleanor Hartwell sat alone at the defendant's table. No lawyer beside her, no family behind her. Just a 28-year-old woman in a white blouse she'd ironed 3 times to hide the wrinkles and black slacks she'd bought at Goodwill for her mother's funeral 6 months ago. She was being sued for her apartment, the only thing her mother had left her. Across the aisle, Preston Charles Whitmore III sat surrounded by a wall of suits. 3 lawyers, 2 paralegals, 1 assistant whose only job was to hand him water at the right temperature. Preston was 45, blonde, and had the kind of tan that came from yacht decks, not sunlight. He owned Whitmore Capital, a real estate empire worth $12 billion. His father had started it. Preston had inherited it. He'd never built anything in his life except enemies. "Your Honor." Preston's lead attorney stood. His name was Harrison Cole, and his hourly rate could pay Eleanor's rent for a year. "This is a simple case of property encroachment. The building at 4521 West Madison Street was purchased by Whitmore Capital in 2019. Miss Hartwell's mother was given a temporary residence agreement that expired upon her death. Miss Hartwell is now illegally occupying the premises." "I have papers," Eleanor said, standing up. Her voice shook, but she stood anyway. "My mother said the apartment was ours. She worked for Your Honor." Cole cut her off with a wave of his hand. "The defendant is not represented by counsel. Anything she says is emotional speculation, not legal argument." Judge Martha Chen looked at Eleanor over her glasses. "Miss Hartwell, do you have an attorney?" "No, ma'am. I couldn't afford one." A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery. Preston leaned back in his chair and whispered something to the man next to him. They both laughed. "I have letters," Eleanor continued, pulling a worn folder from her canvas bag. "My mother kept everything. She worked as a secretary for 20 years, and she said... Preston interrupted, standing up without permission. His lawyers tried to grab his arm, but he shrugged them off. "Your Honor, may I address the court directly?" "Mr. Whitmore, that's highly irregular." "I'll be brief." Preston buttoned his jacket and walked toward the center of the room. He moved like a man who had never been told no. "I want everyone here to understand what we're dealing with." He stopped 3 feet from Eleanor's table, close enough for her to smell his cologne, close enough for her to see the contempt in his ice-blue eyes. "Look at her," Preston said, gesturing at Eleanor like she was an exhibit. "Look at her clothes. Look at her bag. That thing is held together by hope and duct tape." Eleanor's hands curled into fists under the table. "My father built an empire." Preston continued, his voice rising for the gallery, for the reporters in the back row. "He started with nothing and created something. He believed in excellence, in strength, in winners." He turned to face Eleanor directly. "You, Miss Hartwell, are not a winner. You're a waitress who couldn't even afford community college without student loans. Your mother was a secretary who probably stole office supplies. And now you're squatting in my building like a cockroach, hoping someone will feel sorry enough to let you stay." "Mr. Whitmore." Judge Chen banged her gavel. "I'm almost done, Your Honor." Preston reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. He extracted a crisp $100 bill and tossed it onto Eleanor's table. "There," he said. "That should cover a night at the YMCA. Take it, get out of my property, and go back to wherever white trash like you belongs." The courtroom went silent. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Eleanor looked at the bill on her table. She looked at Preston's smirking face. She looked at the lawyers behind him, none of whom had the decency to look ashamed. Something broke inside her. Not her spirit. Her patience. She picked up the $100 bill. Slowly. Deliberately. Then she tore it in half. "I don't want your money," she said, her voice no longer shaking. "I want my home, and I want you to remember this moment, Mr. Whitmore. Because one day very soon, you're going to wish you had never spoken to me like this." Preston laughed, a loud theatrical laugh designed for the cameras. "Is that a threat, sweetheart? From a woman who can't even afford a lawyer? What are you going to do? Spill coffee on me?" "Mr. Whitmore, that is enough." Judge Chen slammed her gavel. "One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt." Preston held up his hands in mock surrender. "Apologies, Your Honor. I'm just trying to clarify the situation for everyone. This woman has no claim, no evidence, and no future. Let's end this charade and move on." He walked back to his seat, accepting whispered congratulations from his legal team. Eleanor stood frozen. The torn pieces of the $100 bill fluttered to the floor. She had nothing left. No money, no lawyer, no hope. And then the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Not swung open, not pushed open. Slammed open with a force that made everyone turn around. A woman entered first. She was in her 70s, white-haired, and confined to a wheelchair that she pushed herself with surprising strength. Her name was Catherine Whitmore, Preston's estranged grandmother. The woman he had put in a nursing home 3 years ago and never visited. Behind her walked a man. He was tall, 6'3", broad-shouldered. His skin was dark as mahogany, and his hair was silver at the temples. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Preston's, though you'd never know it from how he carried himself. No flash, no arrogance, just quiet, absolute power. His name was Marcus Jerome Washington. He was the founder of Washington Holdings. Net worth $800 billion. He had started as a plumber's son in Detroit. Now he owned half the commercial real estate in the Midwest and held patents that powered 70% of American smartphones. And 28 years ago, he had fallen in love with a white woman named Margaret Hartwell. Preston's face went pale. "What? What is this?" Marcus didn't answer. He walked down the center aisle with the steady pace of a man who had faced worse enemies than a trust fund bully in a courtroom. Behind him came another man, younger black, wearing wire-rimmed glasses and carrying a silver briefcase. "Your Honor," the younger man spoke. His accent was British with traces of Chicago. "My name is James Nathaniel Brooks. I am a senior partner at Brooks & Morrison Zurich. I represent the private trust of Mr. Marcus Washington." "This is outrageous." Preston shot to his feet. "This has nothing to do with my case security." "Sit down, Mr. Whitmore," Judge Chen commanded. "Mr. Brooks, I hope you have a good explanation for this interruption." "I do, Your Honor." James approached the bench and handed her a thick document bound in blue leather. 6 months ago, Mr. Marcus Washington filed a sealed testament with the Swiss Banking Authority. The testament contained an activation clause. Activation clause? Judge Chen frowned. "Yes, Your Honor. The clause stated that if any legal action were ever taken against Miss Eleanor Grace Hartwell regarding property or inheritance, the full testament would be automatically unsealed and entered into public record." James turned to look at Preston. "Mr. Whitmore filed his lawsuit against Miss Hartwell 3 weeks ago. The clause was triggered, and now with the court's permission I am authorized to read the relevant portions of Mr. Washington's will." "This is insane," Preston screamed. "What does Marcus Washington have to do with this waitress?" Marcus Washington finally spoke. His voice was deep calm and carried to every corner of the room without him raising it. "She's not just a waitress, Mr. Whitmore." He looked at Eleanor. She stared back at him, confusion and something else recognition flooding her face. "She's my daughter." The courtroom erupted. Reporters leaped from their seats. Camera phones appeared everywhere. Preston grabbed Harrison Cole's arm so hard the lawyer winced. "That's impossible. She's white. Her mother was Margaret Hartwell." Marcus continued, ignoring the chaos around him. "A woman I loved more than my own life. A woman your family destroyed because they couldn't stand the idea of a black man with a white woman." He took a step toward Preston. "Margaret's parents threatened to disown her. Your grandfather, yes, Mr. Whitmore, your grandfather offered to ruin me professionally if I didn't leave her alone. I was 24 years old with nothing but a plumber's license and a dream. So I left." Marcus's voice cracked, just slightly, just enough to show the wound that had never healed. "Margaret told me she lost the baby. I believed her. I spent 28 years believing I had no child. And then 6 months ago, as Margaret lay dying in a hospital bed, she called me." The room was silent now. Even Preston had stopped shouting. "She told me the truth," Marcus said, looking at Eleanor with eyes full of grief and wonder. "She told me I had a daughter. A daughter she had raised alone in poverty because my family wasn't acceptable to hers. A daughter who had worked 2 jobs since she was 16. A daughter who was now being sued for the only thing her mother left her by the grandson of the man who tore our family apart." Eleanor's legs gave out. She collapsed back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. I don't understand," she whispered. "My mother never told me." "She was afraid," Marcus said gently. "Afraid that the truth would put you in danger. Afraid that the Whitmore family would destroy you the way they tried to destroy me." He pulled an old photograph from his jacket pocket. It showed a young black man and a young white woman at a county fair laughing, her head on his shoulder. They couldn't have been older than 22. "Your mother kept this," Marcus said. "She gave it to me before she died. She said she never stopped loving me." Eleanor took the photo with trembling hands. She looked at the woman's face, younger, happier, but unmistakably her mother. "Why now?" Eleanor asked. "Why did you wait until now to tell me?" "Because I needed to be sure," Marcus said. "I needed to verify everything. DNA tests, legal records, your mother's letters. I wasn't going to walk into your life and turn it upside down without absolute proof." He looked at Preston. "And I needed to catch the right snake in the right trap." James Brooks cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if I may continue with the will." Judge Chen, who had been watching this drama unfold, with her jaw slowly dropping, nodded. "Proceed." James opened the blue leather document. The testament of Marcus Jerome Washington, dated February 14th of this year, Valentine's Day as it happens. He began to read, "I, Marcus Jerome Washington, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare that Miss Eleanor Grace Hartwell is my biological daughter, confirmed by DNA testing, conducted at 3 independent laboratories." Eleanor let out a small sob. "As my only living heir, Eleanor Grace Hartwell is entitled to the following 62% voting shares in Washington Holdings, complete ownership of the Washington Family Trust, valued at approximately $420 billion, and..." James paused, a small smile playing at his lips. "And complete ownership of the property at 4521 West Madison Street, Chicago, Illinois, which was quietly purchased by Washington Holdings through a subsidiary 3 months ago, specifically to prevent its use as leverage against my daughter." Preston stumbled backward. No, that's not..." "There's more," James continued. "The testament also contains a provision regarding Whitmore Capital's outstanding loans." Catherine Whitmore, who had been watching silently from her wheelchair, finally spoke. Her voice was frail, but sharp as broken glass. "Your grandfather was a monster, Preston. And your father was a coward. I tried to warn them, but they wouldn't listen." "Grandma, what are you?" "Whitmore Capital has survived for 30 years because of a series of loans from Washington Holdings," Catherine said. "Loans your father was too proud to acknowledge publicly. Loans that Marcus could have called in at any time." Marcus nodded. "I kept your family afloat, Mr. Whitmore. Not out of charity, out of patience. I was waiting for the right moment, waiting for you to make the same mistake your grandfather made." He gestured to Eleanor. You attacked my daughter. You humiliated her in a court of law. You called her white trash." Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the room. "That was a mistake." James Brooks pulled another document from his briefcase. "Effective as of 9:00 a.m. this morning, Washington Holdings has called in all outstanding loans to Whitmore Capital. Total amount $3.2 billion. Payment is due in 30 days. Preston's face went gray. That's impossible. We can't raise that kind of—" "I know," Marcus said. "Which means in 30 days, Whitmore Capital defaults. The company goes into receivership. Every asset gets liquidated." He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "And who do you think is going to buy those assets, Mr. Whitmore?" Eleanor stood up. Her tears had stopped. Her hands had stopped shaking. She looked at Preston, really looked at him for the first time without fear. "My father," she said. "No," Marcus replied. "You." He handed her a pen. "I've already signed the documents. The acquisition of Whitmore Capital when it collapses will be made in your name. You'll own everything, the buildings, the accounts, the patents." He leaned close to her ear. "And his house, the mansion he bragged about on TV last month, the one with the view of Lake Michigan." Eleanor looked at Preston. He was shaking. Actually shaking. The man who had thrown money at her and called her a cockroach was now staring at her like she was a ghost. "One more thing," Eleanor said, finding her voice. "Mr. Whitmore threw $100 at me a few minutes ago. He told me it would cover a night at the YMCA. She picked up the torn pieces from the floor. I think he's going to need this more than I do." She walked across the courtroom. Every step echoed. She stopped directly in front of Preston and held out the torn bill. "Take it," she said softly. "You're going to need somewhere to sleep in 30 days. Preston slapped her hand away. The pieces of the bill scattered across the floor. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I have lawyers. I have connections. I'll fight this in every court in the country." "You can try," Eleanor said. "But here's the thing about connections, Mr. Whitmore." She glanced back at Marcus. "My father has more." Judge Chen banged her gavel. Her hands were trembling, whether from shock or suppressed emotion no one could tell. "This court is in recess. The case of Whitmore versus Hartwell is dismissed." "Miss Hartwell, or should I say Miss Washington?" "Hartwell," Eleanor said firmly. "I'm keeping my mother's name. She earned it." Judge Chen nodded. "Miss Hartwell, you're free to go. Mr. Whitmore, I suggest you speak to your attorneys about the mountain of trouble heading your way." Preston stood frozen as Eleanor walked past him, her head held high. Catherine Whitmore wheeled herself toward the exit, not sparing her grandson a single glance. Marcus Washington offered Eleanor his arm. She hesitated, then took it. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered as they walked toward the doors. "Any of this?" "Neither did I," Marcus said. "When I started, I didn't know how to read a balance sheet. I just knew how to work harder than everyone else. You've been doing that your whole life." They stepped into the hallway where a wall of cameras and shouting reporters waited. Eleanor looked back one last time at Preston Whitmore III. He was still standing at the defendant's table, alone. His lawyers were already packing up their briefcases, refusing to meet his eyes. The man who had mocked her poverty had just lost everything, and she had just begun. The elevator doors closed, and Eleanor let go of Marcus's arm. She stepped back, pressing herself against the cold metal wall, her chest heaving. "I can't breathe," she gasped. "I can't. Look at me." Marcus's voice was steady. "Eleanor, look at me." She raised her eyes. This man, this stranger, had just changed her entire life in 15 minutes. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't name. Concern, hope, fear. "You're having a panic attack," Marcus said calmly. "It's normal. Breathe in through your nose. Count to 4. Hold it." "How are you so calm?" Eleanor demanded, her voice cracking. You just told me you're my father. You just destroyed a man's entire company, and you're standing there like you're waiting for coffee." "I've had 6 months to prepare for this moment," Marcus said quietly. You've had 6 minutes. The elevator stopped. The doors opened to an underground parking garage where a black SUV waited, engine running. I'm not getting in that car, Eleanor said, not moving. Eleanor, no. She held up her hand. I don't know you. I don't know any of this. My mother never... Her voice broke. She never said anything. 28 years and she never told me. Marcus's composure cracked, just slightly. A flash of pain crossed his face. She was protecting you. From what? From knowing I had a father who wanted me. From the Whitmores. From their lawyers. From a world that wasn't ready for a black man and a white woman to raise a child together. Eleanor laughed bitterly. That was 30 years ago. Things have changed. Have they? Marcus stepped closer. Preston just called you white trash in open court. Imagine what his grandfather would have done if he knew you were half black. The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Half black. She had never thought of herself that way. She had grown up poor and white in a poor white neighborhood. Now suddenly she was something else entirely. I need time, she whispered. You don't have time. James Brooks appeared at Marcus's shoulder, his phone already in his hand. Preston Whitmore left the courthouse 4 minutes ago. He's not going home. He's going to his lawyer's office downtown. He's going to start planning a counterattack. What can he possibly do? Eleanor asked. You heard the judge. The case is dismissed. The case is dismissed, James agreed. But the war is just beginning. Preston has connections. Political connections. Media connections. Right now he's probably calling every reporter in Chicago, spinning a story about how Marcus Washington is a con man who fabricated a daughter to steal his company. That's insane. There's DNA evidence, which can be questioned, delayed, buried in legal challenges for years. James glanced at Marcus. Sir, we need to move. Now. Marcus held out his hand to Eleanor. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to let me protect you for the next 24 hours. After that, if you want to walk away, I won't stop you. Eleanor stared at his hand. Large, calloused. Not the hand of a billionaire who had always been rich. The hand of a man who had built things. She took it. The SUV pulled out of the garage into the chaos of downtown Chicago. Through the tinted windows, Eleanor could already see news vans lining the street outside the courthouse. How did they find out so fast? She asked. Everyone in that courtroom had a phone, Catherine Whitmore said from the seat across from her. The old woman had been loaded into the vehicle first, her wheelchair folded in the trunk. By now it's on every news channel in the country. Eleanor's phone buzzed. She pulled it out the cracked screen of a 3-year-old Android and saw 47 missed calls. Her co-workers. Her landlord. Numbers she didn't recognize. And one text from an unknown number. You think you've won? This is just the beginning. I know secrets about Marcus Washington that will destroy both of you. Enjoy your throne while it lasts, princess. She showed the phone to Marcus. His jaw tightened. He's bluffing. Is he? Catherine asked sharply. The old woman leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Marcus. I may be old, Mr. Washington, but I'm not stupid. You didn't build an $800 billion empire without making enemies, without cutting corners, without secrets. Grandma. Eleanor started, then caught herself. The word had slipped out automatically. This woman had been in the courtroom. This woman had helped expose Preston. But she was still a Whitmore. Catherine smiled thinly. It's all right, child. I know you don't trust me. You shouldn't. My family has done terrible things, but I loved your mother. Eleanor froze. You knew my mother? Margaret worked for my husband for 2 years before she met Marcus. She was kind. Genuinely kind. When she fell in love with a black man, my husband tried to destroy her. I couldn't stop him. Catherine's voice hardened. But I could make sure Preston paid for the sins of his fathers. Why now? Eleanor demanded. Why wait until now? Preston put you in a nursing home 3 years ago. You could have fought back then. With what? An old woman's word against a billionaire's? Catherine shook her head. I needed proof. I needed allies. And I needed to wait until Preston made a move so public, so cruel, that even his lawyers couldn't spin it. So you used me as bait. I used the situation as opportunity. Catherine didn't apologize. Preston has been circling that apartment building for years. He knew it was connected to Marcus somehow, he just didn't know how. When he finally filed the lawsuit, I contacted Mr. Washington. Eleanor turned to Marcus. You've known about me for 6 months. And you waited. I had to be sure. Sure of what, that I was actually your daughter? Or sure that you could use me against the Whitmores? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn envelope. Your mother gave me this before she died. She told me not to open it until I was ready to tell you the truth. He handed it to Eleanor. Her name was written on the front in her mother's handwriting. The familiar loops and curves made Eleanor's eyes sting. I haven't opened it, Marcus said. It's yours. Eleanor's hands trembled as she slid her finger under the seal. Inside was a letter handwritten on yellow legal paper. My darling Eleanor, if you're reading this, then Marcus finally found the courage to tell you. Don't be angry with him. Don't be angry with me. We were young and the world was cruel and we made choices that seemed right at the time. I want you to know that your father never abandoned us. He didn't even know you existed. I lied to him because I was afraid of what the Whitmores would do if they found out, afraid of what the world would do to a mixed-race child in 1996. I was wrong. I should have trusted him. I should have trusted you. Marcus is a good man. He built everything he has from nothing. He came from a place even poorer than where we ended up, and he never forgot where he came from. Give him a chance, Eleanor. Not because he's rich, because he's your father, and he's been waiting his whole life to meet you even when he didn't know you existed. I love you. I'm sorry I kept this secret. I hope you can forgive me. Mom. Eleanor read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. She knew she was dying, Eleanor said quietly. When did you see her? 3 days before the end. She called me from the hospital. I almost didn't answer. I didn't recognize the number. What did she say? Marcus closed his eyes. Marcus, I need to tell you something before I die. Something I should have told you 28 years ago. He opened his eyes. They were wet. I drove through the night from Detroit. I made it to the hospital an hour before she passed. She told me everything. About you. About the Whitmores. About the apartment she had held on to for 30 years because I had promised her I would buy her a house someday. The apartment, Eleanor breathed. That's why Preston wanted it. It wasn't random. He knew Margaret had some connection to me. He just didn't know what. His investigators have been digging for years trying to find leverage. When Margaret died and you inherited the apartment, he saw an opportunity. To hurt you through me. Yes, but he didn't know you were my daughter. He thought you were just collateral damage. The SUV pulled up to a building Eleanor didn't recognize. Tall, glass, modern. The sign outside read, Washington Holdings, Midwest Headquarters. Where are we going? Eleanor asked. Somewhere safe, Marcus said. My office has security that... I'm not hiding in your office. Eleanor's voice was sharp. I've been hiding my whole life. In crappy apartments, in dead-end jobs, in a story that wasn't even true. She turned to face him directly. You want me to trust you? Then stop treating me like a package to be delivered. Tell me the plan, all of it. Marcus studied her face. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. The plan is to destroy Preston Whitmore so completely that he never recovers. Not just financially, professionally, socially. I want him to spend the rest of his life knowing that the woman he called white trash is the reason he lost everything. Revenge, Eleanor said flatly. That's what this is about. Justice. There's a difference. Yes. Marcus leaned forward. Revenge is about making someone hurt. Justice is about making them face the consequences of their choices. Preston chose to attack you. Preston chose to humiliate you in open court. He didn't have to do that. He could have settled quietly. Instead, he made it a spectacle. So you're making the punishment fit the crime. I'm making the punishment fit the man. Marcus's voice hardened. Preston Whitmore has spent his entire life hurting people who couldn't fight back. Tenants he evicted, employees he fired, women he harassed. He does it because he believes there are no consequences for men like him. He paused. I'm going to teach him otherwise. Eleanor sat back. Through the car window, she could see people on the sidewalk going about their ordinary lives. 12 hours ago, she had been one of them. Now she was sitting in a bulletproof SUV discussing the destruction of a billionaire. What do you need me to do? She asked. Marcus smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him. Right now, nothing. Just be visible. Let the world see you standing next to me. Let them see that you're not afraid. I am afraid, Eleanor admitted. I know, so am I. He reached out and touched her hand briefly hesitantly, like he wasn't sure he had the right. But we don't have to do this alone. That's the difference between us and Preston. He has employees. We have each other. The words struck something deep in Eleanor's chest. Each other. She had never had that. Not really. Her mother had loved her, but Margaret Hartwell had been fighting her own battles, keeping her own secrets. Eleanor had always been alone. Now suddenly she wasn't. The moment was broken by James Brooks's phone buzzing urgently. Sir, we have a problem. James's face had gone pale. Turn on Channel 7, now. The driver hit a button, and a screen descended from the ceiling of the SUV. A news anchor appeared, her expression grave. Breaking developments in the Washington Whitmore story. Preston Whitmore III has just released a statement through his attorneys claiming that Marcus Washington's so-called daughter is actually an actress hired to perpetrate an elaborate fraud. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Whitmore claims to have evidence that Eleanor Hartwell is not biologically related to Washington, and that the DNA tests presented in court today were fabricated. He has filed an emergency motion for an investigation into what he calls the greatest con in American corporate history. The anchor shuffled her papers. But that's not all. Whitmore has also released documents allegedly showing that Marcus Washington has been under federal investigation for securities fraud since 2019. If these allegations are true, it could spell disaster for Washington Holdings and cast serious doubt on everything that happened in court today. The screen went dark. Eleanor looked at Marcus. His face was stone. Is it true? She asked. The federal investigation. There was an investigation, Marcus said slowly. It was closed 2 years ago. No charges were filed. But it existed. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because it doesn't matter. It was a political hit job. A senator I refused to donate to decided to make my life difficult. The investigation found nothing because there was nothing to find. Preston has the documents, though, James said grimly. Even if the investigation was closed, the existence of it is enough to create doubt, to feed the narrative that you're corrupt. And the DNA? Eleanor asked. Can he really challenge that? He can delay it, Marcus admitted. He can demand new tests. He can claim the labs were bribed. It won't hold up forever, but it doesn't have to. It just has to create enough chaos to buy him time. Catherine Whitmore made a sound something between a laugh and a curse. That's my grandson, she said bitterly. He can't win, so he's burning everything down. If he can't have the empire, no one can. Eleanor stood up or tried to, forgetting she was in a car. So what do? We just let him control the story. No. Marcus pulled out his phone. James, get me Rebecca Chen at the Tribune, and Michael Foster at the Times, and... He hesitated. And Reverend Isaiah Brooks. Why? James raised an eyebrow. Your father's old pastor. Why? Because this isn't just a legal fight anymore. It's a war for public opinion. And the best weapon I have isn't money or lawyers. He looked at Eleanor. It's the truth. The whole truth. About who I am, where I came from, and why Margaret Hartwell trusted me with her daughter's future. You're going to tell the media everything, Eleanor asked. Everything. The love story, the racism, the threats from the Whitmores, all of it. Marcus's jaw set. Preston wants to make this ugly fine, but I've got 30 years of ugly stored up and I'm done keeping quiet. The car pulled into the underground garage of Washington Holdings. But instead of going up, they went down to a sub-basement Eleanor didn't know existed. The doors opened to reveal a conference room that looked like a war bunker. Screens lined the walls. A dozen people in suits were already there working phones and laptops. This is the crisis team, James explained. We activated them the moment the lawsuit was filed. You've been planning this for weeks, Eleanor realized. Months, Marcus corrected. I knew Preston would retaliate. I just didn't know how. He took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Now I do. And now we fight back. A woman approached, tall, sharp-featured, with the look of someone who had never lost an argument. Mr. Washington, I'm Rebecca Torres, your new communications director. I've been monitoring the social media response. And it's split. 50% think you're a hero, the black billionaire taking down a racist trust fund baby. 40% think you're running a scam. 10% are just here for the drama. We need to flip that 40%. I know, and I think I know how. Rebecca glanced at Eleanor. You need to tell your story, not through lawyers, not through press releases. You need to sit down in front of a camera and tell America who you really are. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. I've never done anything like that. Which is exactly why it will work. Rebecca stepped closer. Preston is polished, practiced. He's been giving speeches since prep school. You're a waitress who just found out her father is a billionaire. That's not a weakness. That's your superpower. I don't have a superpower. I have a story I don't even fully understand yet. Then tell them that. Tell them you're confused. Tell them you're scared. Tell them you just found out everything you knew about your life was a lie. Rebecca's eyes were intense. Authenticity beats polish every single time. Preston is going to come out swinging with lawyers and documents. You're going to come out with tears and truth. And in the court of public opinion, truth wins. Eleanor looked at Marcus. He said nothing. He was leaving it up to her. She thought about her mother, about the letter, about 28 years of secrets and lies, and a love story that had been buried because the world wasn't ready for it. Maybe the world still wasn't ready. But Eleanor was done waiting. Okay, she said. Set it up. I'll do the interview. Rebecca nodded and immediately began barking orders into her headset. Marcus touched Eleanor's shoulder. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. No. Eleanor shook her head. You said you wanted Preston to face consequences. Well, so do I. But not just for what he did to me today, for what his family did to my mother, for making her live in fear, for making her lie to me my entire life. She straightened her spine. Preston Whitmore called me white trash. In 30 days, I'm going to own everything he has, and I want him to see it coming. I want him to watch every interview, every news story, every single moment of his downfall. She met Marcus's eyes. You asked what I need to do. This is it. I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to be quiet. I'm going to stand in front of every camera in America and tell them the truth. Her voice hardened. And when I'm done, Preston Whitmore won't just be bankrupt. He'll be a cautionary tale. The man who tried to crush a waitress and lost everything. Marcus Washington smiled a real smile full of pride and something that might have been love. You really are my daughter. Eleanor smiled back. It was a sharp smile, a dangerous smile. Yeah, she said. I guess I am. Somewhere across the city in a penthouse office overlooking Lake Michigan. Preston. Whitmore threw a crystal decanter against the wall and watched it shatter into 1,000 pieces. His phone rang. He answered it. Tell me you have something, he snarled. Tell me you found the weakness. The voice on the other end was cold professional. We found something, sir. Something Washington has been hiding for 20 years. Something that could change everything. Preston's lips curled into a smile. Tell me. It involves a woman named Victoria Chen, a researcher who died in 2004. Officially, it was an accident. Preston sat down slowly. And unofficially, sir, there are questions. Questions that were never answered. Questions that, if raised publicly, could make Marcus Washington look like something much worse than a fraud. Preston leaned back in his chair, the smile spreading across his face. Get me everything. Every document. Every witness. Every rumor. He looked out at the Chicago skyline at the tower with Washington Holdings written in gold letters. That waitress wants a war. I'll give her a war she'll never forget. He hung up the phone and reached for another glass. The first battle was lost, but the war had just begun. The interview was scheduled for 8 o'clock that evening. Prime time. 40 million viewers. Eleanor sat in the makeup chair watching a stranger in the mirror. They had done something to her hair, smoothed it, styled it. The makeup was subtle, but transformative. She looked like someone who belonged on television. She didn't feel like it. 5 minutes, Miss Hartwell. A production assistant poked her head in. They're ready for you on set. Eleanor nodded. Her throat was dry. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The door opened again and Marcus stepped in. He had changed into a fresh suit, but his eyes looked tired. He'd been on the phone for hours, fighting fires Eleanor couldn't see. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. We can find another way. Eleanor turned to face him. What did Preston release? The thing about Victoria Chen. Marcus's face went still. Too still. How do you know about that? James told me. He said Preston's people are claiming you had something to do with her death. Eleanor stood up, her heels clicking against the floor. Is it true? No. Then tell me what happened. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Eleanor watched emotions cross his face. Pain, anger, something that looked like grief. Victoria Chen was a researcher at one of my companies, he finally said. She was brilliant, 28 years old, working on a breakthrough in battery technology that would have changed everything. What happened to her? She died in a car accident. Her brakes failed on a mountain road in Colorado. Marcus's voice was flat, controlled. The police ruled it an accident. The investigation was closed. But Victoria had been receiving threats. Someone didn't want her research to succeed. Someone who stood to lose billions if her battery technology went mainstream. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. Who? I never found proof, but the threats started right after she turned down a buyout offer. Marcus met her eyes. From Whitmore Capital. Preston's father. Charles Whitmore. He wanted Victoria's patents. She refused to sell. 3 months later, she was dead. Eleanor's mind raced. And Preston thinks he can use this against you. How? By spinning it. By suggesting I was the one who wanted her dead, that I killed her for her patents. Marcus's jaw tightened. It's insane. I love that woman. The words hung in the air. Eleanor stared at him. Loved her. Marcus closed his eyes. Not like that. She was like a daughter to me. The daughter I thought I'd never have. When she died, His voice broke. I spent 5 years trying to find out what really happened. 5 years chasing ghosts. And I never found anything I could prove. Until now. Marcus opened his eyes. What do you mean? Preston is scared, Eleanor said slowly, thinking out loud. He's throwing everything he has at us because he knows what's coming. The loans, the takeover, the complete destruction of his company. She stepped closer to Marcus. What if the Victoria Chen story isn't just a distraction? What if it's a confession? I don't follow. You said the threat started after she rejected Whitmore's offer. You said his father wanted those patents. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. What if Preston knows something? What if his family was involved in her death and he's trying to bury it by blaming you first." Marcus stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. Not hope exactly, but possibility. If that's true, there would be evidence, documents, communications. Where would they be? The Whitmore family estate, Charles Whitmore's private study. He kept records of everything. He was paranoid about being betrayed by his own people. And Preston inherited everything when his father died. 3 years ago, yes. Eleanor's mind was spinning. Catherine, Preston's grandmother. She lived in that house for 60 years. She would know where Charles kept his secrets. She's 82 years old and in a wheelchair. She's also the woman who just helped us destroy her own grandson in open court. Eleanor grabbed her phone. Where is she now? At the safe house. James is with her. Eleanor was already dialing. James put Catherine on. Now. There was a pause. Then the old woman's voice crackled through the speaker. Eleanor, is something wrong? Catherine, I need to ask you something. Charles Whitmore, your husband, did he keep records, private records that Preston might not know about? Silence on the other end. Catherine, why are you asking me this? The old woman's voice had changed, guarded, afraid. Because Preston is claiming Marcus killed Victoria Chen, and I think your husband might have been involved. The silence stretched. Eleanor could hear her own heartbeat. There's a safe, Catherine finally said. Behind the portrait in Charles's study, the combination is 7 to 1452. My wedding date. She laughed bitterly. Charles always said he married me for luck. He was right, just not the kind he expected. What's in the safe? I don't know. I never looked. I was too afraid of what I might find. Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. But Charles kept everything, Eleanor. Every deal, every threat, every body buried. Eleanor hung up and turned to Marcus. We need to get into that house. Preston owns it now. He'll have security everywhere. Then we need to get him out of it. Marcus frowned. How? Eleanor smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. By giving him something he wants more than anything else in the world, the chance to destroy me on live television. 30 minutes later, Eleanor walked onto the set of America Tonight. The lights were blinding. The audience was silent. Host Jennifer Walsh sat across from her, perfectly coiffed and utterly predatory. Miss Hartwell, thank you for joining us. I know this has been an extraordinary day for you. That's one word for it. Eleanor settled into her chair, forcing her hands to stay still. Let's get right to it. Preston Whitmore has accused you and Marcus Washington of perpetrating an elaborate fraud. He claims you're an actress, that the DNA tests were faked, and that this is all part of a scheme to steal his company. How do you respond? Eleanor leaned forward. I respond by asking Mr. Whitmore a question. If I'm an actress, where did I train? If I'm a fraud, where's my criminal record? I've worked at the same diner for 6 years. My coworkers know me. My landlord knows me. My mother's friends from church know me. She looked directly at the camera. I'm not an actress, Mr. Whitmore. I'm a waitress who just found out her whole life was a lie. And if you want to call me a fraud, you'd better bring more than accusations. Because I've got DNA tests from 3 separate labs, a letter from my dying mother, and 28 years of wondering why I never knew my father. Jennifer Walsh's eyes gleamed. This was good television. Let's talk about your mother, Margaret Hartwell. You claim she had a relationship with Marcus Washington nearly 30 years ago, but there's no record of them ever meeting. Because they were hiding. Eleanor's voice cracked, not for effect, but because the emotion was real. My mother was white. Marcus was black. In 1995, that was still dangerous, especially when powerful people wanted to keep them apart. You're referring to the Whitmore family. I'm referring to the people who threatened my mother, who told her they would destroy Marcus if she didn't leave him, who made her lie to the man she loved and tell him she lost their baby. Jennifer leaned in. Can you prove any of this? Eleanor pulled out her mother's letter. This is my mother's handwriting. I have experts ready to verify it. She wrote this before she died, explaining everything. The threats, the fear, the reasons she kept me a secret. May I see it? Eleanor hesitated. Then she handed it over. Jennifer read it silently. When she looked up, something had changed in her expression. The predatory gleam was gone, replaced by something that almost looked like respect. This is quite a document. It's the truth. The truth my mother was too afraid to tell while she was alive. And you're not afraid? Eleanor thought about the question. Really thought about it. I'm terrified, she admitted. 12 hours ago, I was a waitress. Now I'm on national television, being accused of fraud by a billionaire who threw money at me and called me white trash. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea if anyone will believe me. She looked at the camera again. But my mother spent her whole life being afraid. She died keeping secrets because she thought the truth would hurt me. And you know what? She was wrong. The truth doesn't hurt. Lies hurt. Silence hurts. Fear hurts. Eleanor straightened her spine. I'm done being afraid. I'm done being silent. And I'm done letting people like Preston Whitmore decide what I'm worth. The studio was absolutely silent. Even the cameraman had stopped moving. Jennifer Walsh cleared her throat. Strong words, but Preston Whitmore has made some serious allegations. He claims Marcus Washington was under federal investigation for securities fraud. He was investigated. He was cleared. No charges were ever filed. He also claims there are questions about the death of a woman named Victoria Chen, a researcher who died in 2004. Eleanor felt her heart rate spike. This was the trap. This was what Preston wanted to shift the narrative from his crimes to Marcus's alleged ones. But Eleanor was ready. Victoria Chen was a brilliant scientist, Eleanor said carefully. She was working on battery technology that would have revolutionized the industry. She was also threatened before her death, threatened by someone who wanted her patents. Who? I think that's a question Preston Whitmore should answer. His father, Charles Whitmore, made Victoria Chen an offer 3 months before she died. She refused, and then her brakes mysteriously failed. Jennifer's eyes widened. Are you accusing the Whitmore family of murder? I'm saying there are questions that were never answered. Questions that Preston Whitmore seems very eager to avoid by attacking Marcus Washington. Eleanor leaned forward. Ask yourself this. Why is Preston so focused on Victoria Chen? Why bring up a 20-year-old case that has nothing to do with me or my inheritance? You're suggesting he's hiding something. I'm suggesting that when someone throws that much mud, it's usually because they're standing in their own dirt. Jennifer Walsh was silent for a moment. Then she smiled a genuine smile, not a TV smile. Miss Hartwell, you're remarkably composed for someone who just found out she's the heir to an $800 billion fortune. I'm not composed, Eleanor said honestly. I'm running on caffeine and anger. But I've been poor my whole life. I've been overlooked my whole life. And I've learned that the only way to survive is to keep moving forward even when you're terrified. She stood up. I don't know if I deserve Marcus Washington's money. I don't know if I'll be a good businesswoman or a terrible one. But I know this. I am Margaret Hartwell's daughter. I am Marcus Washington's daughter. And I will not be intimidated by a man who thinks his last name makes him better than everyone else. Eleanor walked off the set. Behind her, Jennifer Walsh turned to the camera with an expression of stunned admiration. Well, she said, I think we just witnessed something extraordinary. Across the city, Preston Whitmore watched the broadcast with mounting fury. His hand tightened around his whiskey glass until it shattered, slicing his palm open. He didn't even notice the blood. She's winning, he snarled to the empty room. That little waitress is actually winning. His phone buzzed. An alert from his security system. Someone had just entered the Whitmore estate. Someone who shouldn't be there. Preston grabbed his keys and ran. The safe was exactly where Catherine said it would be. Behind a portrait of Charles Whitmore hidden by a panel that looked like ordinary wall, James Brooks worked the combination with steady hands. 71452. The lock clicked open. Inside were files. Dozens of them. Yellow with age but meticulously organized. My God. James breathed as he flipped through them. He kept everything. Bribes, threats, payoffs to police officers. Marcus stood behind him, his face pale. Is there anything about Victoria? James pulled out a red folder. The label read, Chen V. Resolution. He opened it. Inside was a memo dated October 2004, 3 weeks before Victoria Chen's death. The Chen problem has been resolved. Johnson confirms the vehicle modification was successful. Payment transferred per attached invoice. All records to be destroyed upon confirmation of outcome. C.W. Marcus's hands were shaking. He killed her. Charles Whitmore killed Victoria. And Preston inherited everything, James said grimly, including his father's crimes. The sound of a car screeching to a halt outside made them both freeze. Time to go, James said, grabbing the folder and stuffing it into his briefcase. They ran for the back entrance. Behind them, they could hear Preston screaming at his security guards. Find them, and bring them to me. Marcus and James burst through a service door and into the waiting SUV. The driver hit the gas before the door was even closed. Did you get it? Eleanor's voice came through the speakerphone. We got it, Marcus said, breathing hard. Charles Whitmore ordered Victoria's murder. There's a paper trail. Then we have him. We have Preston. Not yet. James was scanning the documents with his phone, sending copies to secure servers. We need to verify these. We need to make sure they're authentic before we go public. How long? 24 hours. Maybe less if we push it. Eleanor's voice was steel. Push it. Preston knows we were there. He's going to do something desperate. She was right. At that exact moment, Preston Whitmore was making a phone call to a man he had hoped never to contact again. I need a favor, Preston said, his voice tight. You need more than a favor, the voice on the other end replied. You need a miracle. Can you deliver one? A long pause. That depends. How far are you willing to go? Preston thought about Eleanor's face on television. Thought about her standing in his grandfather's house going through his father's files. Thought about everything he was about to lose. As far as it takes, he said. Then we have a deal. But understand this, Mr. Whitmore, once we start down this road, there's no turning back. No mercy, no second chances. Preston smiled. It was the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. I understand. Good. Then let's talk about Eleanor Hartwell, and how we're going to make her disappear. The line went dead. Preston poured himself another drink, not caring about the blood still dripping from his cut hand. The game had changed, and he was done playing by the rules. 3 hours later, Eleanor's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it anyway. Miss Hartwell. The voice was distorted, mechanical. You have something that belongs to me. Who is this? Someone who knows secrets. Secrets about your father. Secrets about your mother. Secrets about the night Margaret Hartwell really decided to leave Marcus Washington. Eleanor's blood went cold. What are you talking about? Your mother didn't leave because of threats, Miss Hartwell. She left because Marcus Washington wasn't who she thought he was. She left because she discovered something that terrified her. You're lying. Am I? Then ask yourself this. Why did your mother wait until she was dying to tell Marcus about you? Why not tell him sooner? Why keep the secret for 28 years? Eleanor couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. You think you know the truth, the voice continued, but you've only scratched the surface. The real story is darker than you can imagine, and if you keep digging, you're going to find things that will destroy everything you think you know about your family. Who are you? I'm the person who knows where the bodies are buried, literally. The voice laughed, a cold mechanical sound. You have 24 hours to drop this, Miss Hartwell. Walk away from the inheritance. Walk away from Marcus Washington. Walk away from Chicago. And if I don't, then I'll tell the world what your mother really saw that night in 1995. The night she decided to run. The night Marcus Washington showed her who he really was. The line went dead. Eleanor stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Behind her, Marcus spoke. "Who was that?" Eleanor turned. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "Someone who says they know what really happened between you and my mother." Marcus went still. Completely, utterly still. "What do you mean?" "They said my mother didn't leave because of threats. They said she left because she discovered something about you, something that terrified her." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were full of a pain Eleanor had never seen. "There are things I haven't told you," he said quietly. "Things I hoped you'd never have to know." "What things?" "Things about who I was before I became Marcus Washington. Things about what I did to survive." He met her eyes. "Things that might make you hate me." Eleanor felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "Tell me," she said. "Tell me everything." Marcus sat down heavily. "It starts in Detroit," he said. 1987. I was 17 years old, and I killed a man." The words hung in the air like poison. Eleanor stared at her father, and everything she thought she knew shattered into 1,000 pieces. Eleanor didn't move, didn't breathe. The words echoed in her skull like gunshots. "You killed someone?" "Yes." "Who?" Marcus's hands were clasped together so tightly his knuckles had gone gray. "His name was Darnell Carter. He was 23 years old, and he was about to murder my mother." Eleanor's legs gave out. She sank into the chair across from Marcus, never taking her eyes off him. "Tell me," she whispered. "All of it." Marcus stared at a point somewhere beyond her, somewhere in the past. "My father died when I was 12. Heart attack on a job site. No insurance, no savings. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us in our apartment. She cleaned offices at night, worked at a laundromat during the day, and took in sewing on weekends." His voice was flat mechanical, like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "Darnell Carter was a dealer who ran our block. He decided my mother owed him protection money. When she couldn't pay, he came to our apartment with a gun." "Marcus." "I was 17. I weighed maybe 140 pounds. But I had a baseball bat behind the door, and I knew if I didn't do something, my mother was going to die." Marcus finally met her eyes. They were wet. "I hit him once, just once. He fell and cracked his skull on the radiator. He was dead before the ambulance arrived." Eleanor's throat was so tight she could barely speak. "What happened after?" "The police came. They saw a dead drug dealer in a poor black family's apartment. They saw a teenage boy with a bat." Marcus laughed bitterly. "They called it justifiable homicide, self-defense. No charges filed." "Then why?" "Because the story didn't end there." Marcus stood up and walked to the window. "Darnell had a brother, Raymond Carter. He ran the whole operation. And he swore he would kill me and everyone I loved." Eleanor felt ice spreading through her veins. "Your mother," she breathed. "My mother. Raymond spent 2 years hunting me. I dropped out of school, changed my name, moved from city to city. I was 19 when I finally ended up in Chicago working construction under a fake identity. Washington isn't your real name." "My real name is Marcus Jerome Williams. Washington was the name of the man who gave me my first legitimate job. Theodore Washington. He owned a small plumbing company. He knew I was running from something and he didn't care. He said everyone deserves a second chance." Marcus turned to face her. "When Theodore died, he left me the company. I built it into something bigger, then bigger still. I buried Marcus Williams so deep that no one would ever find him. But someone did. Your mother." Marcus's voice cracked. "Margaret found out. We'd been together for 2 years when she discovered my real identity. She saw a news article about Raymond Carter being released from prison. She recognized his face from a photo I kept hidden. What did she do? She confronted me. I told her everything. The killing, The running, the fake name. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. She said she needed time to think. A week later, she told me she was pregnant. Eleanor's heart stopped. She knew she was pregnant when she left you. Yes, and 2 days after that, Raymond Carter showed up at her workplace. He told her that if she didn't leave me, he would kill her and the baby. The room spun. Eleanor grabbed the armrest to steady herself. That's why she ran, Eleanor realized. Not because she was afraid of you, because she was afraid of him. She never told me about Raymond's visit. I thought she left because of what I'd done, because she couldn't love a killer. Marcus's voice broke completely. I spent 28 years thinking the woman I loved rejected me because of my past. And the whole time she was protecting me. Protecting you. Eleanor stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she stood anyway. Is Raymond Carter still alive? Marcus nodded slowly. He's 71 years old now, lives in a nursing home in Detroit. Parkinson's disease. Does Preston know about him? I don't know, but whoever made that phone call knows the whole story. They know about Darnell Carter, about Raymond, about everything. Then we find out who's feeding Preston information. Eleanor's voice hardened. And we cut them off. How? Eleanor pulled out her phone. Catherine Whitmore knows every secret her family ever kept. If there's a connection between Preston and Raymond Carter, she'll know about it. She dialed. Catherine answered on the second ring. Eleanor. What's wrong? Catherine. I need you to think carefully. Did Charles Whitmore ever have dealings with a man named Raymond Carter? A drug dealer from Detroit. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Catherine. Where did you hear that name? The old woman's voice had gone cold. Someone called me, threatened me, said they know what really happened between Marcus and my mother, said they know about the night she left. Oh, God. Catherine's breathing became ragged. Oh, God. Eleanor, you need to get out of there. You need to run. Why, what's going on? Raymond Carter didn't find Margaret by accident. He was sent. By Charles. Catherine was crying now. Charles found out about Marcus's past. He paid Raymond to threaten Margaret, to scare her away. Eleanor felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Charles Whitmore. He's the reason my parents separated. He's the reason for everything. The threats, the lies, your mother's fear. Catherine sobbed. I didn't know until years later. I found the receipts, the payments to a private investigator, the wire transfers to an account in Detroit. And Preston. Preston found the same records I did. 3 years ago when his father died. That's why he put me in the nursing home. To keep me quiet. Eleanor's grip on the phone tightened. Preston has known this whole time. He knew his grandfather was responsible for destroying my family, and he still attacked me in court. He still called me trash. He's his grandfather's heir in every way that matters, Catherine said bitterly. The same arrogance, the same cruelty, the same willingness to destroy anyone who gets in his way. Not anymore. Eleanor's voice was steel. Where are the records? The payments to Raymond Carter. In the safe. The same safe you already found. There should be a second compartment behind the first. Charles was paranoid he had layers of secrets. Eleanor hung up and turned to James, who had been listening silently. We need to go back to the estate. Preston will have tripled security by now. Then we find another way. Eleanor looked at Marcus. Raymond Carter. You said he's in a nursing home. Can he talk? I don't know. I haven't seen him in 30 years. Then it's time for a reunion. The drive to Detroit took 4 hours. They traveled in a convoy, 2 SUVs, 6 security guards, and a lawyer. Eleanor sat in the back seat staring at her mother's letter. She had read it so many times the paper was starting to wear thin at the creases. Marcus sat beside her. They hadn't spoken since leaving Chicago. You must hate me, he finally said. For what, defending your mother? For lying. For hiding who I am. Eleanor folded the letter and put it back in her pocket. My mother lied to me for 28 years. She had her reasons. So did you. That doesn't make it right. No. It doesn't. Eleanor turned to face him. But you want to know what I think. Marcus braced himself. Tell me. I think you were a 17-year-old kid who did what he had to do to protect his family. I think you spent the rest of your life running from a mistake that wasn't really a mistake, and I think my mother loved you anyway. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. She saw the real you, Eleanor continued. Not Marcus Washington the billionaire, not Marcus Williams the killer, just Marcus, a man who would do anything to protect the people he loved. She reached out and took his hand. That's the father I want to know. That's the man my mother never stopped loving. Marcus broke down. For the first time in 30 years, he let himself cry, great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. Eleanor held his hand and let him grieve. The nursing home was a gray building on the outskirts of Detroit. Cheerful name. Grim reality. Eleanor walked through the front doors with Marcus 2 steps behind. The receptionist looked up with a plastic smile. Can I help you? We're here to see Raymond Carter. The smile faltered. Are you family? Old friends, Marcus said. His voice was steady, but Eleanor could see his hands trembling. Room 247. But I should warn you, Mr. Carter isn't very coherent these days. The Parkinson's has affected his cognition. They walked down the corridor. The smell of antiseptic and old age hung in the air. Eleanor fought the urge to gag. Room 247 was at the end of the hall. The door was open. Raymond Carter sat in a wheelchair by the window. He was a shell of a man, thin, withered his hands, shaking constantly. His eyes were milky with cataracts. But when Marcus stepped into the room, those cloudy eyes focused. Something flickered in them. Recognition. Fear. You, Raymond rasped. I knew you'd come eventually. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway. 40 years of history hung between them, like a wall of glass. I didn't come to hurt you, Marcus said. Then why are you here? Eleanor stepped forward. I'm Margaret Hartwell's daughter. Your brother threatened her 30 years ago, on Charles Whitmore's orders. Raymond's face twisted, something that might have been shame. I know what my brother did. I know what I did. Then tell us. Eleanor crouched down to eye level with the old man. Tell us everything, and maybe you can die with a clear conscience. Raymond stared at her. His shaking hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. Charles Whitmore found me through a dirty cop. Said he'd pay me $50,000 to scare off some white girl who was messing around with a black man. Raymond laughed bitterly. I didn't care about the race stuff. I just wanted the money, and I wanted to hurt Marcus. So you threatened my mother. Told her I'd kill her baby. Kill everyone she loved. Said Marcus was a murderer who'd bring her nothing but pain. Raymond's eyes met Marcus's. I wasn't lying about that part. You did kill my brother. Your brother was going to kill my mother. I know. Raymond's voice cracked. I knew it then, too. Darnell was out of control. High all the time. Mean as a snake. But he was my blood, and I couldn't let it go. So you destroyed an innocent woman's life instead. I destroyed a lot of lives. That's what I did. That's what I was. Raymond slumped in his chair. But Whitmore, he was worse than me. At least I knew I was a monster. He thought he was righteous. Eleanor pulled out her phone. Say that again, on camera. Raymond hesitated. You're dying, Eleanor said bluntly. Maybe weeks, maybe months, but you're dying and you know it. Is this really how you want to go out? Carrying Charles Whitmore's secrets to the grave. Raymond looked at Marcus. Something passed between them, not forgiveness, but understanding. Fine, Raymond said. Turn on your camera. I'll tell you everything. For 30 minutes, Raymond Carter confessed. The payments from Whitmore, the threats to Margaret, the ongoing blackmail that had funded his drug operation for years. He named names, dates, amounts. He described meetings with Charles Whitmore's lawyers. He explained how they had tracked Margaret for years, making sure she never contacted Marcus again. When he finished, Eleanor stopped the recording. "One more question," she said. "Preston Whitmore, does he know about any of this?" Raymond smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "Preston found out 3 years ago, right after his daddy died. He came to see me himself." Eleanor's heart stopped. What did he want? Same thing his grandfather wanted. Silence. "He offered me 100,000 to keep my mouth shut." Raymond laughed. "I took the money. What else was I going to do? I'm dying anyway." So Preston has known for 3 years that his family destroyed my mother's life, and he still attacked me in court. Preston Whitmore is exactly like his grandfather, the same hate, the same pride, the same belief that money makes right. Raymond leaned forward. "But here's something he doesn't know, something Charles never told him." "What?" "The payments to me weren't the only payments. Charles had another operation running at the same time, a cover-up." Eleanor felt electricity run down her spine. "Victoria Chen." Raymond nodded slowly. "I don't know the details, but I know Charles was scared, real scared. He kept saying something about a witness who needed to be handled, right around the time that scientist died. There was a witness to Victoria's murder. There was somebody who saw something. Charles paid a lot of money to make sure they never talked." "Who?" Raymond's face went blank. "I don't know. I swear I don't know. But if there's paperwork, it would be in the same place as everything else. Charles is safe." Eleanor stood up. Her mind was racing. "The second compartment, behind the first." She turned to Marcus. "We need to get back to Chicago, tonight. Preston will be expecting us. Then we give him something else to worry about." Eleanor held up her phone. "We release Raymond's confession, right now. Let Preston try to spin his way out of this while we find the rest of the evidence." Marcus looked at Raymond Carter one last time. The man who had haunted his nightmares for 40 years was just a broken old man in a wheelchair waiting to die. "Why?" Marcus asked quietly. "Why did you spend your whole life destroying people?" Raymond met his eyes. "Because that's what I was taught. That's what this world taught me. You hurt people before they hurt you. You take what you can before someone takes it from you." He looked at Eleanor. "But your daughter, she's different. She's not afraid. She's not angry. She's just sure. Sure of who she is. Sure of what she wants." He turned back to Marcus. "I never had that. Neither did you for a long time, but she does." Raymond closed his eyes. Maybe that's what finally breaks the cycle. Someone who refuses to be broken. The drive back to Chicago was tense. Eleanor uploaded Raymond's confession to a secure server and sent copies to every major news outlet in the country. Within an hour, her phone was exploding. "It's everywhere," James reported from the front seat. "Every network is running the story. Preston's lawyers are refusing to comment." "Good. Keep the pressure on." "There's more. The FBI has opened an investigation into the Whitmore family. They're citing the Victoria Chen documents we recovered earlier." Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. "It's working." "Not yet," Marcus said grimly. "Preston still has one card left to play." "What card?" "Me. My past. The killing." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Raymond's confession proves the Whitmores conspired to separate us. But it doesn't change what I did when I was 17. If Preston releases that, the narrative shifts. I become the villain again." "You were defending your mother." "I killed a man, Eleanor. In the court of public opinion, that's all that matters." Eleanor's phone rang. Unknown number again. She answered it. "Miss Hartwell." The same distorted voice. "Impressive move with Raymond Carter. But you've made a terrible mistake." "Have I?" "You've given me no choice. In 1 hour, I'm releasing everything. Marcus Williams, Darnell Carter, the whole ugly truth." "Go ahead." Silence on the other end. "Excuse me." "I said go ahead." Eleanor's voice was steady. "Release it. Tell the world that my father was a 17-year-old boy who defended his mother from a drug dealer. Tell them he spent 40 years building an empire from nothing. Tell them he's been carrying that guilt his entire life." She leaned forward. "And then explain why the Whitmore family paid that drug dealer's brother to destroy an innocent woman. Explain why Charles Whitmore conspired to separate a black man from a white woman in 1995. Explain why Preston Whitmore knew about all of it and still called me white trash in open court." Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. "You want a war of narratives? Fine. Let's see whose story the American public likes better. A self-made black man who defended his mother from a killer, or a dynasty of racists who've been destroying lives for 3 generations. She hung up. Marcus stared at her. "You just challenged them to release everything." "I challenged them to a fight they can't win." Eleanor turned to face him. "You've been running from your past for 40 years. It's time to stop running." "Eleanor, you're not Marcus Williams anymore. You're not the scared kid who killed a man to save his mother. You're Marcus Washington, the man who built $800 billion from nothing. The man who waited 28 years to meet his daughter. The man who's about to take down the most corrupt family in Chicago." She grabbed his hand. "That's the story we tell. Not the killing, the survival, not the fear, the triumph." Marcus's eyes filled with tears for the second time that day. "How are you so strong?" Eleanor smiled. It was her mother's smile. "Because I'm your daughter. And we don't break." 20 minutes later, Preston Whitmore's final bomb dropped. Every news channel carried the story. Marcus Williams, Darnell Carter, the killing in Detroit. For exactly 3 hours, the narrative shifted. The comments sections filled with accusations. The stock price of Washington Holdings dropped 12%. And then Eleanor Hartwell walked into a live press conference and changed everything. She stood at the podium alone. No lawyers, no handlers. Just a 28-year-old woman in a simple black dress. "My name is Eleanor Grace Hartwell. You've heard a lot about my father today. Let me tell you the truth." She looked directly at the cameras. When Marcus Washington was 17 years old, a drug dealer broke into his home with a gun. That dealer was going to kill his mother. Marcus did what any son would do. He protected his family. She paused. "That's not a scandal. That's survival. That's love. That's the kind of man my father is." She held up her phone. "But let me tell you about the real scandal. Let me tell you about Charles Whitmore, who paid a convicted criminal to threaten my pregnant mother. Let me tell you about Preston Whitmore, who knew about all of it and still tried to take my home." She pressed play on Raymond Carter's confession. For 30 minutes, the world listened. When it was over, Eleanor looked at the cameras one last time. "My father killed a man 40 years ago. He spent every day since trying to make up for it, building companies, creating jobs, giving back to communities that looked like the one he came from." Her voice hardened. "The Whitmores have spent 3 generations destroying people, and they've never apologized for any of it." She stepped back from the podium. "You decide who the real villain is." She walked out. Behind her, the room erupted. The press conference ended at 9:47 p.m. By midnight, the tide had turned completely. Eleanor watched the news coverage from the war room at Washington Holdings. Every major network was running the same story: Whitmore Dynasty, decades of corruption exposed. The hashtag #HatchJustice. For Margaret was trending worldwide. Stocks recovering. James reported, scrolling through his tablet. "We're down only 3% now. By morning, we might break even." And Preston. Radio silence. His lawyers released a statement calling everything unsubstantiated allegations. Nobody's buying it. Eleanor nodded, but she didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted, hollowed out. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won? You haven't. Meet me at the Whitmore estate. Midnight. Come alone, or I release the witness." Eleanor stared at the message. The witness. Raymond had mentioned someone who saw what really happened to Victoria Chen. Someone Charles Whitmore had paid to stay silent. If Preston had that person, he had one last card to play. "I need to go somewhere," Eleanor said, standing up. Marcus looked at her sharply. "Where Preston wants to meet, at the estate." "Absolutely not." Marcus was on his feet instantly. "It's a trap." "Probably, but he says he has the witness, the person who saw Victoria Chen's murder." James stepped forward. "We can send security, set up a perimeter." He said, "Come alone." Eleanor grabbed her jacket. "If I show up with guards, he'll disappear, and we'll never find out who killed Victoria." Marcus grabbed her arm. "Eleanor, listen to me. Preston is desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things." "I know." She met his eyes. "But this isn't just about us anymore. Victoria Chen was murdered. Her family never got answers. If there's a chance I can find out what really happened, I have to take it." "Why, you didn't even know her." "Because you loved her." Eleanor's voice softened. "Because she was the daughter you thought you'd never have. Because someone should fight for her even 20 years later." Marcus's grip on her arm loosened. His eyes glistened. "You're just like your mother," he whispered. "Stubborn, brave, impossible to argue with." "Then stop arguing." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I'll be okay. I survived Preston Whitmore in a courtroom. I can survive him in his own house." She walked out before he could stop her. The drive to the Whitmore estate took 20 minutes. Eleanor drove herself, no driver, no security, just her and the dark road ahead. The estate loomed at the end of a private drive, a massive Georgian mansion that had been in the Whitmore family for 4 generations. Every window was dark except one on the 3rd floor. Eleanor parked at the front entrance and walked up the steps. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open. "Preston?" Her voice echoed through the empty foyer. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, the kind of wealth that had been inherited, not earned. "Up here." Preston's voice drifted down from the staircase. "3rd floor, my grandfather's study." Eleanor climbed the stairs slowly, her heart pounding. Every instinct told her to run. She kept climbing. The study door was open. Preston sat behind a massive mahogany desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked terrible, unshaven eyes red-rimmed, his $1,000 shirt wrinkled and stained. "You came alone," he said, almost surprised. "I didn't think you would." "You said you had information about Victoria Chen." "I do." Preston gestured to a chair across from him. "Sit." Eleanor remained standing. "Talk." Preston laughed bitterly. "You're not afraid of me at all, are you? 3 days ago, I could have destroyed you with a phone call. Now look at us." "Things change." "Yes, they do." Preston drained his whiskey and poured another. "You want to know what really happened to Victoria Chen? Fine, I'll tell you. But first you need to understand something." "I'm listening." "I didn't know." Preston's voice cracked. "I didn't know what my grandfather did. Not to Victoria. Not to your mother. I found out 3 years ago when my father died and I inherited his files." Eleanor studied his face. He looked broken. Genuinely broken. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm about to confess to obstruction of justice." Preston pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "This is everything. The payments to Raymond Carter. The cover-up of Victoria Chen's death. And this..." He pulled out a single photograph. "This is the witness." Eleanor took the photo. It showed a young woman, maybe 25, with dark hair and frightened eyes. "Her name is Maria Santos. She was a housekeeper at my grandfather's lake house in 2004. She was there the night Victoria Chen died." "What did she see?" "She saw my grandfather's men tamper with Victoria's car. She saw them remove the brake lines." Preston's hand shook as he refilled his glass. "And she saw them pay off the police officer who investigated the accident." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Where is she now?" "Witness protection. My grandfather arranged it himself, paid her $2 million to disappear and never talk. But I found her 6 months ago." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "Because I'm a coward." Preston's voice was barely a whisper. "Because I thought I could bury it. Because I told myself that what my grandfather did wasn't my responsibility. He looked up at her, and for the first time, Eleanor saw something human in his eyes. Shame, regret, pain. But then you showed up, this waitress who wouldn't back down, this woman who looked at me like I was nothing. And I realized I am nothing. I've spent my whole life coasting on my family's money, pretending I earned it, pretending I deserved it. Preston stood up and walked to the window. My grandfather was a monster. My father was complicit. And I've been protecting their legacy for 3 years instead of exposing it. Why are you telling me this now? Preston turned to face her. Because I'm done. I'm done lying. I'm done hiding. I'm done being a Whitmore. He handed her the folder. Everything is in there. Maria Santos's location, the payments, the cover-up. Take it. Give it to the FBI. Let them burn it all down. Eleanor looked at the folder, then at Preston. What happens to you? I'll probably go to prison. Obstruction of justice conspiracy to cover up a murder fraud. He laughed hollowly. The Whitmore legacy reduced to a prison cell. You could run. You have enough money to disappear. I could, but I'm tired of running. Preston met her eyes. You said something in that courtroom. You said the truth doesn't hurt. Lies hurt. Fear hurts. He sat back down heavily. You were right. I've been hurting my whole life. Hurting because I knew deep down that everything I had was built on blood. That my family destroyed people for profit. That I was part of it whether I wanted to be or not. Preston poured his last drink. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to end this. For Victoria Chen, for your mother, for everyone my family has ever hurt. Eleanor stood in silence for a long moment. The man in front of her was not the villain she had expected. He was just a broken man, crushed by the weight of his own legacy. There's one thing I don't understand, she finally said. The phone calls, the threats, the distorted voice saying they knew secrets about Marcus. Was that you? Preston frowned. What phone calls? Eleanor's blood went cold. Someone has been calling me, threatening me. They knew about Marcus's past, about my mother. That wasn't me. Preston's confusion was genuine. I've been too busy trying to destroy you through lawyers. I didn't have time for phone games. Then who? The study door slammed open. A woman stood in the doorway. Tall, elegant, dressed in red. Her face was familiar. Eleanor had seen it in old photos at the Whitmore estate. Victoria Whitmore, Preston's aunt. The woman who had been traveling abroad for the past 3 years. I was wondering when you'd figure it out, Victoria said, stepping into the room. Hello, Preston. Hello, Eleanor. She pulled a gun from her purse. I think it's time we had a family meeting. Eleanor's mind raced. Victoria Whitmore. Preston's aunt. Charles Whitmore's daughter. She had been mentioned in the family files, but always as a footnote, the black sheep who had left the family business years ago. Victoria, Preston stammered. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Switzerland. I came back for the show. And what a show it's been. Victoria circled the room, the gun never wavering. My nephew finally growing a conscience. The waitress exposing our family's dirty laundry. Very dramatic. You made the phone calls, Eleanor said. The threats about Marcus, about my mother. Of course I did. I've been watching this little drama unfold for months, waiting for the perfect moment to step in. Why? Victoria smiled. It was a cold smile, completely devoid of warmth. Because I was supposed to inherit everything. The company, the estate, the power. But my father gave it all to my brother instead. Because I was a woman. Because I wasn't suitable for the family business. She turned to Preston. And then this idiot inherited everything from his father. Everything that should have been mine. Victoria put the gun down. Preston said, his voice shaking. We can talk about this. Talk like you talked to Maria Santos, like you talked to the FBI. Victoria laughed. No, Preston. The time for talking is over. You are going to hand everything to this waitress on a silver platter. You are going to destroy our family's legacy. Our family's legacy is murder and corruption. Our family's legacy is power, and power doesn't apologize. Victoria aimed the gun at Eleanor. But since you've decided to have an attack of conscience, I'll have to clean up this mess myself. Eleanor didn't flinch. You're going to kill us both. I'm going to do what needs to be done. Preston will have a tragic breakdown after the stress of the scandal. Murder-suicide. Very sad. Victoria shrugged. And you, well, the waitress who got too close to the truth. Collateral damage. The FBI already has the files. Marcus has copies of everything. Killing us won't change anything. No, but it will feel very satisfying. Victoria's finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the study. Eleanor flinched, waiting for pain that never came. Victoria Whitmore crumpled to the ground, the gun falling from her hand. Behind her stood Catherine Whitmore, a small pistol smoking in her trembling grip. "I'm sorry," the old woman whispered. "I'm so sorry." Eleanor rushed to kick Victoria's gun away. The woman was still breathing. The shot had hit her shoulder, but she was incapacitated. "Catherine, how did you... I knew she would come back." Catherine's voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Victoria was always the most dangerous one, more ambitious than Charles, more ruthless than Preston. I knew when the scandal broke, she would try to take control. Preston stared at his grandmother. "You shot your own daughter." "I shot the woman who was about to murder two innocent people to protect her own ambition." Catherine lowered the gun. "I've spent 60 years watching this family destroy everything it touches. I couldn't watch it happen again." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had heard the gunshot. Police were coming. Eleanor pulled out her phone and called Marcus. "It's over. Send the FBI to the Whitmore estate. We have everything." The next 12 hours were chaos. Police, FBI agents, paramedics, reporters. Victoria Whitmore was arrested at the hospital, charged with attempted murder conspiracy and a dozen other crimes. Preston Whitmore voluntarily surrendered himself and began cooperating with federal investigators. Maria Santos was located in witness protection and agreed to testify. Her statement confirmed everything Charles Whitmore had ordered Victoria Chen's murder to prevent her battery technology from threatening his investments in oil and gas. The Whitmore empire collapsed overnight. Stock price plummeted to zero. Assets were frozen. Employees scattered like rats from a sinking ship. And through it all, Eleanor stood at the center, steady and unshakable. 3 days after the confrontation at the estate, Eleanor walked into the headquarters of Washington Holdings as its new CEO. The board had voted unanimously. Marcus had stepped aside, citing a desire to let the next generation lead. The truth was simpler. He wanted to spend time getting to know the daughter he had just found. Eleanor stood at the head of the conference table, looking at the faces of people who had doubted her just a week ago. Executives, lawyers, analysts, all of them waiting to see what she would do. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "A week ago, I was serving coffee at a diner. Now I'm running an $800 billion company. That doesn't make any sense." She paused. "You're right. It doesn't. I don't have an MBA. I don't have 20 years of experience. I don't know the difference between a derivative and a dividend." A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. "But here's what I do know. I know how to work. I know how to survive. And I know that this company was built by a man who started with nothing and refused to quit." Eleanor looked at each face around the table. "My father built Washington Holdings on determination and integrity. Those values got buried somewhere along the way. They got buried under growth targets and profit margins and the endless pressure to be bigger." She straightened her spine. "That ends today. We're going back to basics. We're going to run this company the way Marcus Washington ran his first plumbing shop in Detroit. With honesty, with hard work, with respect for every single person who works here." She pulled out a folder. "My first act as CEO is to establish the Victoria Chen Foundation. It will fund research in sustainable energy, the research that Victoria was working on when she was murdered. We're going to finish what she started." The room was silent. "My second act is to establish the Margaret Hartwell Scholarship. Full rides for first-generation college students who work their way through school, like my mother did, like I tried to do." Eleanor closed the folder. "And my third act is this. Any employee of this company who has information about unethical behavior past or present has 24 hours to come forward without penalty. After that, if I find out you knew about wrongdoing and said nothing, you're gone." She looked at the door. "The meeting is adjourned. Get back to work." The executives filed out in stunned silence. They had expected a puppet. They had gotten a warrior. Marcus was waiting for her outside the conference room. That was quite a speech. "I learned from the best." They walked together toward the elevator. The building that had seemed so intimidating a week ago now felt like home, like possibility. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked. "Now we rebuild, we heal, we try to make up for all the years we lost." Marcus pressed the elevator button. "And you learn how to run a company." "I don't know if I can do this." "Yes, you do." Marcus turned to face her. "You've been running things your whole life. The diner, your mother's finances, your own survival. This is just bigger." The elevator doors opened. "There's something I need to do first," Eleanor said, "before we move forward." "What's that?" "I need to visit my mother's grave. I need to tell her it's over, that she can finally rest." Marcus's eyes glistened. "Can I come with you?" Eleanor took his hand. "I was hoping you would." The cemetery was quiet. Late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. Eleanor stood in front of Margaret Hartwell's headstone, Marcus beside her. The simple marble marker seemed too small for everything her mother had been. "Hey, Mom," Eleanor whispered. "I brought someone to meet you." Marcus stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. "Margaret, it's me. It's Marcus." He knelt down beside the grave. "I'm so sorry it took me this long. I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner. I'm so sorry for everything." Eleanor watched her father grieve for the woman he had loved and lost. 40 years of pain finally allowed to surface. "She knew," Eleanor said softly. "At the end, she knew you would come. She knew you would find me." "How do you know?" "Because she told me. In the letter." Eleanor pulled out the worn envelope. "She said you were a good man. She said she never stopped loving you. And she said—" Her voice cracked. "She said she was sorry. For the lies. For the secrets. For all the years you lost." Marcus wept. Great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. Eleanor knelt beside him and wrapped her arms around him. "She's at peace now," Eleanor whispered. "We made sure of that. The Whitmores will never hurt anyone again. Victoria Chen will finally get justice. And you finally got to meet your daughter." Marcus pulled back and looked at her face. Margaret's eyes. Margaret's smile. Margaret's strength. "You're her legacy," he said. "You're proof that love survives. That truth wins. That the people who try to destroy us never really can." Eleanor stood and helped her father to his feet. "Ready to go home?" Marcus smiled. It was a real smile full of hope and healing. "I've been ready for 28 years." They walked out of the cemetery together, father and daughter, leaving behind the graves and the grief and the ghosts of the past. Behind them, a gentle breeze stirred the flowers on Margaret's grave. If you listened closely, it almost sounded like a sigh of relief, like a mother finally letting go. 6 months later, Eleanor Hartwell stood on stage at the annual Washington Holdings shareholders meeting. The company had doubled in value. The Victoria Chen Foundation had funded 12 research grants. The Margaret Hartwell Scholarship had sent 47 students to college. And Preston Whitmore was serving 8 years in federal prison for obstruction of justice. "When I started this journey," Eleanor told the crowd, I was a waitress who couldn't afford a lawyer. I was a woman who had been mocked for her worn-out shoes and her thrift store clothes. She smiled. Now I'm standing here in front of all of you running a company worth almost $1 trillion, and I want you to know something. She leaned into the microphone. I still shop at thrift stores sometimes. I still know how to make a perfect espresso. And I still remember what it feels like to be overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. Her voice hardened. That memory is what drives me. It's what makes me fight for the employees who work overtime and never get recognized. It's what makes me fund scholarships for kids who have to choose between books and groceries. It's what makes me believe that anyone can rise above their circumstances. She looked at Marcus sitting in the front row. He was crying again. He cried a lot these days. Happy tears. My father built this company from nothing. He taught me that success isn't about where you start. It's about refusing to quit. Eleanor stepped back from the podium. My mother spent her whole life protecting me. She taught me that love is stronger than fear, that truth is stronger than lies, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. She raised her chin. And Preston Whitmore taught me the most important lesson of all. The room was silent. He taught me that when someone tells you you're nothing, you prove them wrong. When someone tries to take everything from you, you take everything from them. And when someone mocks your worn-out shoes, Eleanor smiled sharp and triumphant. You buy the company that makes theirs. The room erupted in applause, and Eleanor Hartwell, the waitress who became a billionaire, stood in the spotlight and let herself believe that her mother was watching. Because some stories don't end with revenge, they end with justice. And justice, real justice, isn't about making your enemies suffer. It's about proving that they never had the power to break you in the first place. If this story moved, you hit that subscribe button and join our family. Share it with someone who needs to hear that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And remember, no matter who tries to tear you down, you decide what you're worth. Nobody else.